welcome to the CNBC TV 18 special. I'm Shereen Bhan, and we're in conversation with a man who believes that data is the new resource. Nandan Nilekani, thanks very much for joining us on CNBC TV 18. Data is the new oil, data is the new resource. This sort of has become the big slogan of over the last few months. You talk about how you believe that India will be data rich before it becomes economically rich. From a strategic perspective, from a development agenda perspective, what implications does that have for us?
Well, I think we have a very unusual situation where per capita incomes are maybe $1,500 or so, but people are creating a lot of digital footprints when they use their smartphone. Now with the launch of Reliance Jio's feature phone, when they use the feature phone, everything is going to create digital footprints. And you can now see how people can use their own digital footprints to get access to benefits, like get a better loan, or get better health care, or get better education. So in my view is that in a country where people are going to be data rich before they're economically rich, business models that will succeed are those that enable people to use the data for their future.
So you said that earlier the data was the differentiator. Now data is the business model. What does that mean then, as far as not just the way the government operates, but companies who are trying to use data as a resource operate as well?
Well, you know, the whole phenomenon of data becoming so critical is really over the last 15 years. And, you know, it began with search and social media, where people used data of the user to figure out what ads to show him. And therefore, you got a service free, but then your data enabled you to, you know, you could predict what you could buy, and then people sold ads to you. But in the last 5-6 years, there have been remarkable advances in what's called as artificial intelligence. First, there was something called machine learning, and of late 4-5 years, there's something called deep learning, which uses neural networks, and that is causing a phenomenal increase in the use of AI for solving a problem, and that requires large amounts of data.
In that context, then, what is the challenge that this age of data throws up for a country like ours?
So the heart of what needs to be done is that data should be made available to the individual or to the business to use for doing his work or his life better. And that means putting data in the hands of the person whose data it is in the first place. And that also means that the machine learning and AI which will be used on that data will also be to make his life better in some way. For example, you take healthcare. You should be able to use data, my data, along with all the other data you have, to give me better healthcare, because I can figure out in a village what kind of treatment you need and so on. So this one aspect of using these technologies is to eliminate jobs, automation. But the another aspect is how do you make access to education and health for everyone? So you have to rethink these technologies in a way that they are socially productive.
But, you know, to make these technologies socially productive, given the state of broken infrastructure, you talked about healthcare, you talk about education, given the fact that it's the last mile connectivity that is the problem in each of these sectors, it's the broken down infrastructure that's the big problem. Do you truly believe that this can be a way of addressing those issues?
Oh, absolutely. Because basically what is happening is, thanks to formalization, thanks to individuals becoming part of the formal economy, through identity, bank accounts, and so on, thanks to businesses becoming part of the formal economy through GST, you are removing knowledge asymmetry in society. So people who were earlier invisible in the system, or small business were invisible, now they're all part of the system. And when you remove knowledge asymmetry in a society, then you can improve transactional efficiency and business.
Since you're talking about transactional efficiency and you talked about the GST, it's about a month now that we've seen the GST being rolled out, and so far, so good. We'll of course know what happens when the returns start to be filed in terms of whether the infrastructure can cope with it or not. But what is the implication that you see of the GST from a transactional efficiency point of view? How does it, yes, you know, it'll reduce time and so on and so forth, but how do you see it disrupting the business model, so to speak?
Well, I think the biggest advantage, in the short term, of course, you know, it creates a single market, trucks move faster, all that stuff. But once we get over all this, I think the biggest issue is that this is going to create one of the world's largest databases of real-time performance of an economy that you've ever seen. Because 8 million businesses are going to file an average of 120 invoice line items per month at the level of HSN and SAC codes, which means it will say we sold steel rods at this price and so on. and 8 million businesses with 120 line items is 1 billion invoice line items per month. And that data, if you can analyze it, tells you so much about the economy, tells you exactly what is growing, what is not growing, which region is going to grow.
So we'll have a better measure of the state of the Indian economy?
In real time. I mean, obviously somebody has to put all this together. The data is there. But yes, I mean, you could on every day or every week, you could at a very granular level actually figure out what's happening in the economy.
You know, you've talked about this data inversion, and you say that Indian law should ensure data inversion, which basically means that I can ask a company or the government back for my
own data. I'm not nobody else's. My own data.
My own data. But do you really believe that this is realistic? I mean, do you see this happening?
Yeah.
Who's going to, the government's going to give you back the data that you've
your own
taken?
data, no?
Yeah, but do you really see that happening?
Why not? I mean, actually the government does give your own data back. For example, if you look at the income tax, they have a system called Traces, which you can ask for your own TDS return details and they give it back to you. Your bank, you can ask for your bank statement. So everybody is a consumer or a business can ask for his own data. That's normal activity.
So what do you believe the government ought to do now to ensure that this is, in fact, as you point out, part of the law?
No, I think there are three things that are required. One is government's own databases must proactively publish data at the request of an individual or a business with suitable security and authentication. So income tax, GST, driver's license, this, that, all that. So that's the government side of it. Second is the regulators have to enforce that in their area. So the RBI has to make sure banks give you your bank statements. SEBI has to make sure that mutual fund gives you a mutual fund statement, and so on. Insurance companies have to give and so on. So each regulator, TRAI can say that every mobile company should give a consumer his data on how he used the service. And the third is all other companies, and that for a third one requires the law. So I would recommend data protection and empowerment law.
Since we're talking about companies of the future, and today the most valuable companies in the world are companies that have their origins in how they're using data, whether it's Google or Facebook and so on and so forth. Where do you then see the India corporate story, when we talk about companies who are now being valued because of the fact that they're able to generate and aggregate this kind of data? What does the road ahead look like as far as corporate India is concerned?
Well, I think Indian companies are waking up to the realization that data is a very strategic thing, and we certainly see that with all the internet companies. We have many internet companies, Flipkart, Ola, and so forth. And then, of course, what we're seeing with Jio, where Mr. Ambani launched the Jio phone, which I think is going to take feature phones to a next set of 100 million users. And I think there again, the data of their consumption they can use to get better deals. So I think you're seeing data becoming more important in the Indian context also.
We've already seen the disruption take place in the telecom sector with the launch of Jio. Now with this smart feature phone that Reliance has launched, effectively free. Of course, there is that 1,500 rupee deposit and hence effectively free. But how do you see this changing the competitive landscape? How do you see it disrupting this market even further?
Well, I think it's a very savvy strategy, because smartphone penetration and the price points of smartphones require, it'll have a certain adoption curve. But there are a few 100 million people in India who use feature phones. And I think this is targeted at that market where the phone essentially comes free if you use it for 3 years. Otherwise, I guess you lose your 1,500 rupee deposit. And your, and your monthly bill is about 153 rupees.
Yeah.
So I think the pricing of the service, as well as the idea that the phone becomes free, I think will attract a whole new set of consumers. And I'm sure that the other telcos will have to respond and do something, to compete with that.